he said that on Figma where people create templates, right, and then you go duplicate it and use it and all that. He said that's open source, right? That's kind of like because open source, it's just giving back to the community. So you have people duplicate. I was just excited about the fact that someone was doing stuff out here, right? And sometimes, in our own space here in Nigeria, right, only a few, and most are not very consistent, right? But I think you're actually doing great stuff, and
Yay! That's good. That's
yeah.
good. I'm happy. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, welcome to the pod. This is not just design podcast. So basically, I've sent you so many emails. First, let me ask you, how is my writing? My emails. How is my writing?
Well,
To
I'm
be
not sure I'll be
sincere,
the best judge
no,
of
no, no.
that.
Any judge is good. Be sincere. I want to know if it's. Tell me from scale of 1 to 5, 1 to 9 to 10. How good is
Okay.
the email?
Okay, I'm not sure I'm going to use the word good or bad to describe. I'm just going to
Mhm.
use a particular word on mine, which
Oh
I
yeah.
would say friendly, right? And I don't know whether you've seen my tweet anywhere or you follow me on Twitter or I don't know, but I just know that the first email you shared with me, right, use that particular line, like Margaret certainly didn't see
Yeah.
this person coming, Sebiet coming, or Sebiet actually didn't see Margaret coming, and also. That actually struck a chord because I know I've tweeted that, and that's actually from the series C. So
Yeah.
I was like, this guy probably knows me somewhere. So that's, of course, established a relationship. So good or bad is usually within the context of, again, people do have their own metrics for,
Uh-huh.
saying something is good or bad. But I wouldn't just say bad in the context of maybe there were grammatical errors or no, I wouldn't judge. In fact, the fact that you were able to establish a common ground and I was able
Yeah.
to connect it, like I've tweeted this person knows me so well. So I was really interested, like, okay, that line that every other thing you said, right? So like, okay, we have a common interest. So it wasn't really like, oh, this guy didn't greet me or stuff.
Yeah.
You had established a common ground and I related to based on that. So for me, I think Mail was
That was that
cool.
was cool, right? Good,
Yeah.
good, good. My head is sweating right now.
Oh, but you still haven't answered my question. So where exactly do you follow me on Twitter? Because I'm not sure I know you on
So
Twitter.
here's the thing. I finished watching C in January. So for people listening, the podcast is starting. It's about to start. Just chill. So I've been watching C in January, and
Yeah.
I have been so much interested. Like the plot, the play, everything makes sense. And then when I spoke to UK, I spoke to Mary Blessing. I was like, I need a designer. I need someone to talk to about open source. She's my guy, right? So she's my like accountability partner. Like she talks about open source all the time. I'm like, how do I contribute? I've been working in a team for open source for like two
Yeah.
plus years. And she was like, hey, let me connect you with Kingsley. So, I have to go do my due diligence. I've never heard of Kingsley before. And I'm like, who is this guy? So I went out and I started doing research and I was like, okay, who's this guy? I went to your LinkedIn, just basic due diligence. And I now saw your tweets, right? About the
Yeah.
Maga. Maga didn't see, like, Sibet didn't see Maga coming. And the thing was like,
Coming.
exactly. She didn't see it at all. She anticipated every other person's move. She didn't anticipate that Margaret was going to kill her. And I was like, ah, shit.
Open, she never believed in her life that her sister would probably. She
And
she
she,
believed that if it would have happened, she would be the one to do it, not
yes,
the other way
not
around.
the other way around. She thought Margaret was too weak and too, like,
Yeah.
just ill to do it. She didn't see it coming. And I was like, ah, shit. This particular tweet is the tweet I would use. And
Wow.
I just crossed my finger and I hope it works because, there's a line there. If I had gone too far, I would have like, this person is stalking me. So,
It's cool. It's nice. Well, it goes to say people just kind of like, of course, people stalk me on social media. I do that, but not in a bad
uh-huh,
way, anyways.
mhm. Yeah, I feel. That's cool. That's cool. So,
Yeah.
welcome to the pod. This podcast is sponsored by Narration. They also have their own podcast. Link is in the description. So, in today's episode, we want to discuss about how you got started with open source. I don't understand me personally. Like, for me, this podcast is selfish in a way because I generally just like to talk to people that I find interesting in the design space. I don't know anything about open source in designing, right? I have been designing for a company which is also open. They have open source projects and I've done work on them for over 2 years. But
Whoa.
I don't know exactly how designers contribute to open source that you can then you leverage on it as an opportunity or even come out to say, oh, I'm doing open source. All I know is I work for these guys, I design, I love the project, they go live, my name is there on the projects, I use it in my portfolio, I'm able to share it. Is that not all they use to, designing for open source? Like, is there more?
Well, based on the fact that you've been doing open source activity for like 2 years, I think we should reverse our positions, right?
Okay. No,
You should be
no,
the one that has to
no,
be
no, 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 no.
disclaimed.
It's different. It's different if I know what I'm doing. It'd be like you dey play ball for streets for like you dey play ball for streets for like two, three,
Street,
four
street
months
football.
exactly, and then you carry go pitch for like 1 week. You don't even know what you're doing. You will just be you will be lost. So that's
Okay.
what it is for me.
For those listening, of course, my name is Kingsley Mkpandiok, and I am actually a UX designer, user experience designer. So, and contributing currently to Chaos Africa. Chaos is community held um, analytics open source software. And so, what we actually do, I'm just going to start there first, then probably just go back to your question. So what we do at Chaos Africa is just a chapter of Chaos, right? Chaos Global. So Chaos Africa, what we do is actually create metrics, right? So just like the name implies, community health analytics. So we help create metrics that help, other open source communities in Africa, right? So when you think of health, not really in the context of your biological well-being right now, but it's more like probably the biological well-being of software, right?
Mhm.
And all that. So creating metrics that helps, you know, these communities thrive and do better. So going back to your question, so how did I start contributing? So surprisingly, I haven't really been up to a year in this space,
Mhm.
intentionally. Perhaps I don't know if there were things I was doing before now, because I think based on research and some of the research I've been doing recently, maybe there are some stuff I've been doing in the past unknowingly, which was actually contributing or giving out to the community, right? Which are some of the things I'll still share in the course of this conversation. So I started contributing somewhere, I think July last year. And before July, I've been doing my little background, research on open source. Of course, like I believe you're a designer too, at least
Yeah.
from this thing I listened to, I sort of picked that you're a designer. So you know that there've been this whole, buzz about, constantly one way or the other on Twitter and all that, people talking about open source and all that. So it's like, oh, what is open source? What is open source all about? And I just have a couple of guys in my space, maybe not like my primary contact, but
Yeah.
secondary contact, that in my space doing the whole open source stuff. Like, so what exactly is this stuff all about? So I've been looking it up, but just like the same issue every other designer face, I didn't really know how to approach it. So I think it was a lot more defined from the aspect of developers. It looked more like a developer thing, right,
Yeah.
than a
That's what it
designer
felt like.
thing. Yeah, which is also one impression I'm going to correct, as we go on. So like that's what the ecosystem makes it look like anyway. So I think I stumbled to just fast track. I stumbled on Root's article on LinkedIn. Root Ikenga. They're also active on Twitter. You should know Roots.
Yeah.
So I stumbled on an article on LinkedIn, and I read the article, took me to our blog, and I connected with her on LinkedIn and messaged her on LinkedIn like, come on, I saw your article and I really want to. And I think that also happened at the time where I had completed a contract project and I had maybe some spare time anyways, and I wanted to,
Mhm.
do something. So I really want to figure out and start contributing, giving out back to the society. So fortunately, I would say, because after the whole scenario and everything, we had a conversation. And she said usually she doesn't really reply easily on LinkedIn because she has get a lot of messages. I was like, wow, lucky me. So you replied immediately when I messaged. So a whole lot of conversation
What
going.
what's chaos like? Like I know Chaos Africa is a branch of chaos.
Mm,
So
yeah.
tell me, what kind of projects do you guys handle? What do you do?
Okay, so like I said, perhaps you didn't get me clearly. So I said, so chaos It's
No,
actually Chaos Africa.
I heard you. You said it's
Yeah,
like the health management for
yeah,
softwares, right?
mm,
What's
yeah.
practically what's that like?
Okay, for example, let me just use this as an example. Currently, we are working on a project, we tag events, badging website actually. So, but then the whole idea of events badging has been going on and on. Now, one of the things we do is assigning diversity and inclusive badge to event owners, right? So let's say I am actually organizing an event. I want to put up an event and
Physical
could be
or
virtual,
virtual meeting?
could be virtual or
Okay.
online, right? So is that event inclusive? Understand? So inclusive, we're talking about accessibility and
Yeah.
all that. So as a designer, you kind of like start factoring in, if I'm physically challenged, can I get access to your, the events, and
Yeah.
all that? What other factors? A whole lot of factors and all that. So now when we talk about creating metrics, to analyze events and all that, so event owners, submit information, send information about the event. So we have reviewers, in chaos, right? Reviewers go through, your events, the information you've sent, because we basically have questions we ask. That's been happening going on GitHub, right? So event owners, submit, their data and all that. So we have reviewers go through this, and at the end of the day, we assign you a badge. So you may be qualified for a gold badge depending on, some of the criteria, the metrics you've met, events diversified, inclusive, accessible, and all those other factors. These are like the health we are talking about. We assign, it could be a gold badge, a silver badge, and there are different categories, right? And of course, just like in game, right? If we play games, you notice that maybe as you go to each level, probably you get certain badge, that gives you access to certain stuff and all
Yeah.
that. So this badge now you can use it to either apply for certain things or give you access to certain things online or offline, right? So
Mm-hmm.
because this is also recognized. So this is just a part of what we do. There are several other projects, maybe most of which I can't really talk about here, right? So several other projects going on, right, simultaneously in chaos, right? Understand? So, but at the core of what we do, like I said, is that we have a lot of open source communities, a whole lot
Yeah.
of open source projects out there. So chaos is actually doing one unique thing to ensure that, for example, understand, let me just use this perhaps to be able to relate more to it. So now I am actually the maintainer at chaos, the design mentor at chaos Africa, right? So let's just say Open Source Africa, which you know very well.
Yeah.
I
Oscar.
presume Oscar first. So Open Source Africa now, right? So maybe I believe they have their design team, right? And they have stuff going on. So one of the things I can do, or I am also doing currently at Chaos Africa, is coming up with metrics to better manage and organize a design team. So
Okay.
one of these are some of the things I'm doing. So based on the metrics I've come up with, based on some of the things I've tried, I've experimented in Chaos Africa, and it's working, right? Now we can actually model these to other open source communities, other open source, equals this thing communities, yeah, in Africa and beyond. So that's just a little bit picture, into what chaos is all about. There's so much more, but this is kind of
Mm-hmm.
like the center of what we do.
Okay.
I don't know if it kind of like makes sense to you.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. Let me try and rephrase it. More like you guys, right? You have open source projects that you are working on. So now
Yes,
you use from that open source projects to acquire, let's say, data on how to, improve other ones. So with that data, if there are other open source projects in Africa that other founders or people are creating, you can contribute to helping them maintain it as well. So it's like
exactly,
it's like a self-sustaining system where what you learn from this new project is what you use since you're a maintainer to improve the other project. And
exactly,
it keeps alive all the other open source projects that can come up within
E-
Africa.
exactly. So of course, for Chaos Africa, we are focused on
Yeah.
African, yeah.
Okay.
So
Makes sense. Makes sense.
yeah. So I think that's kind of like of course when you dig deep, there are a lot more, but just just basically what Chaos Africa is all about. So I don't know if
Mhm.
I answered
Makes
that question.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Tell me first, right? The metrics. What
Yeah.
kind of metrics do you guys use? Now I'm learning because if I go back to work now, I would want to use this. Like, what kind of metrics do you guys use as the design maintainer, right? What kind of practical like metrics do you guys?
Let's just keep the word metric aside because some
Okay.
persons, listening to this are like, oh, these guys are going technical again, or what exactly is metric,
Okay.
and we're talking about centimeter and millimeters here and all those things. So the metrics there is actually just call it an idea, right?
Mhm.
So now I'm going to explain this whole thing via this uh, route, more like before I joined open source, right, and started contributing. I for one had this whole there were a whole lot of pain points when you speak as a UX designer, a whole lot of challenges I had personally. I'm saying, how do I contribute, right? What's this project even about? I recall joining KS Africa and for like I think the first month I didn't know what to do. So I just like man, I think their web banner, their hero session needs to be redesigned. I just jumped on Figma and just started doing my own thing. First, maybe because I didn't understand the project, which is also one thing I always say that for you to start contributing, you have to spend time understanding the project. When you
Yeah.
understand the project, you always know what to do. But let's just leave that aside. So I had issues, right? I didn't know where to start. I didn't know what to do, right? So what's going on? What are the active projects? What can I do? So now when I took a time, of course, discussing to with the maintainers, like of course Roots, and of course other, contributors on the project, joining community calls, I got to understand the project better. And one of the first things I did was to create a Google Doc, right?
Okay.
A document. Now, a document that, in my own way, how I was able to understand the project, right? And how I can also communicate to designers, right? Because, of course, developers, they may not really have issues. Probably they are familiar with GitHub and they just jump on and start doing their stuff. But now, some designers up to this point really don't really see the need for GitHub, right? And here you are, they just want to contribute, and probably you start talking about GitHub or one of that stuff, or maybe so how the questions were. I had some questions, and based on how I understood the things that were going on, I started putting them down on the document. And personally, I now decided to pin the documents to the design channel on the open source community. So now what happened was that best of what I understood about the project, I put it down there. And now I also made it open that any designer that joins, by the time we are done onboarding the designer, and if you also feel that you have a certain understanding about the project that probably wasn't in the document while you read the document,
Yeah.
you now go there and add your own part to the document.
Okay.
Understand? So by the time all this stuff is done, right? Understand? So this sole exercise now could be considered a metric, like an onboarding metrics, right?
Okay.
Where you discuss, right? You discuss with people. Before I come to maybe a decision or a conclusion on a particular matter, I'll
Mhm.
probably be able to have made a sample of data or collection or talk to designers, which are also some of the things I've done. Know their pain points, right? From their pain points, I now get an idea on how I can solve that problem. So that's actually how you come up with metrics. Not like we have a particular this thing seated there and maybe someone just decide, oh, this is a particular metric you should use to do this. No. By
Okay.
the time, even currently, there's actually a survey going on. So what we do is we just take a survey. It could be the issues designers face,
Yeah.
when they join open source community or what they can contribute. So by the time we get this feedback, of course, analyze the data and all that, we are now able to like, okay, some people have issues, maybe joining they just go to Figma and probably there's no design system and everything is scattered
Mm.
and all that. They can't contribute. So we can develop a metric from that and probably just tag a name to it and all that. So
Mhm.
the metric is just an idea, understand, to solve a particular issue, a particular problem, right? In open source space.
So is it like when I join a team and they want to like hey, this is an example of something I did recently. So
Yeah.
I joined the team recently and then the task was to carry out UX audits on UX depth. So they designed without a designer. So there's a lot of like UX depth here and there, some things they miss here and there. So that was I
Mm-hmm.
created a template that
Mm-hmm.
everybody can keep track of. Okay, this particular button needs a hover state. This is the kind of user that would see this button, the regular user, whenever they are signing up. this is a kind of problem. It's a UI problem. It's a low effort, high value problem. So I just created that template and I used it. Now, that template, I can use it at work and I can also share it out to other people. Would you say,
Yeah.
since people face that problem when they join the company where they don't know how to track UX depths, would you say what
Yeah.
I just did is very similar to what chaos designers would
If
do?
you look at it, the bottom line of what you just did is solving a particular problem, right?
Yes.
Understand? So you call it UX depth, or
Yeah.
right? So now the metric could just be maybe how to resolve or approach UX depth, right? And
Mhm.
someone now click on, maybe it could be a link or something, and what the person sees is a documentation of what you've done,
Yeah.
right? So now this person can now take the information, the insights, right, or the data, or the things, the elements you've created, and now replicate it in his or her own community, right?
Mhm.
And we'll still get the same results. Understand? Because you've been able to create more like a template, like you also
Yeah.
you call it a template. You've been able to create a template. So a template, of course, is more like I just tweak it to what suits me, right? And I'll still end up getting the same result. Understand? So
Yeah.
that's just it, actually. So that's what metrics, that's just the whole concept of metrics, creating metrics for, projects, out there,
Um,
both within, of course, and without. Yeah.
must I use GitHub? Must designers use GitHub when they're doing open source?
Okay. I think I just kind of have some little story tied to all these
Okay.
experiences,
Please
and
give
maybe
me,
that's why I
give me.
also speak. Okay. Okay. I think um I recall attending a particular design conference in Port Harcourt, and well, some years back, and
Wait, do you stay in Port Harcourt?
yeah,
You stay in Port Harcourt?
I'm great.
Hey, I Bobby. Knows me. I like, don't mind me, Jai. I have one Port Harcourt friend. This is just a tangent. I have one Port Harcourt friend that always comes around. And every time he comes around, he's always playing all these Port Harcourt guys when they're singing their song now.
So,
Abu Bibi, are you? Who goes you? So if I hear anybody say they're from Port
mm,
Harcourt or they live in Port Harcourt, either I just start, start hyping their songs or I ask them about their bole.
uh,
That's
yeah, but it's nice. I've seen Port Harcourt for a while, but I don't really vibe the whole slang.
ah
I know, but that's cool. Where do you stay?
me. I stay in Ifel in Ocean State.
Okay, okay, okay. So
Back to the story.
why
Go
most
ahead.
designers use GitHub? Yeah, most designers use GitHub. So I was trying to talk about, attending a conference in Port Harcourt, right? And Perry
Mhm.
talked, and I think, of course, she's really been to the open source stuff, way
Yeah.
back. And I think she mentioned, I think, in that meeting, why designers, right, should know about GitHub and why they should use GitHub. I think it was even after that conference, I just went back, created an account on GitHub, but I basically didn't know what to do with it or what. And funny enough, I didn't really go to search, but I know after a while back, I started searching, and I even asked my colleague the question because, of course, I work with the company, and I asked my friends developers, like, how do you guys think designers can use GitHub?
Yeah.
So the reply I got didn't really answer my question, right?
Tell me about the reply.
And I just, yeah, I recall one of them saying that, man, you can't just think of ways designer can use GitHub, right? Because, you talk about a version control, coding, and, the fogging in this thing and everything. So, so a whole lot, right? So, and I can recall that particular, he said he can't really think of ways designer, but I wasn't satisfied with that reply, and I kept on searching online and all that, So now, but contributing for like about 8 months now, I would say, to Chaos Africa, I've actually come to some of which I've documented, and because I get to put up articles about open source and all that, some of which I've documented, I'm still putting that up together, right? So now designers actually, because most open source, right? Because even starts with the whole history of open source, which I don't want to go into, that take a whole lot of time to go into that, but so when you look at open source, right, you can't really talk about open source and not mention GitHub,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, so now, and another thing is that one of the reason why every designer will need to have that basic knowledge of, the interface and how to interact, or even get involved in discussion, on GitHub, is because most of the open source projects you want to join will most likely be on GitHub, right? We'll certainly have a repository on GitHub. And
Yeah.
as a designer, right, if you're searching for, besides maybe just Googling for an open source project to contribute to, right,
Yeah.
which most likely sometimes takes you to a website, and from the website, you can decide to join their communication channel, be Slack and all that. But one of the ways, or one of the fastest ways, because sometimes you might drop the question in the Slack channel, come on, it's a community, and sometimes someone doesn't reply
Yeah.
immediately and all that. So one of the fastest way to get a project to start working on is going on GitHub, right? For example, you go on GitHub now, just search for Chaos, Chaos badging or Chaos project and all that. You find Chaos organization. By the time you click on Chaos organization, you navigate to, of course, you have the code, you have the issues and all that on GitHub. So you just navigate to issues, because issues are more like tags where there are open tags and all that. So
Yeah.
by the time you click on issues, now you'll see it could be you could find design issues, you could search, because of course for every issue that is open, if it's properly open, has a label too. Understand? It
Mhm.
could be just like most task management tool. You use Trello, you use Asana, and all that. So you see design issue, maybe developer front end issue, product design issue, and all that. So you also find that, because one thing most people don't also know about GitHub is that it's not just about coding, coding, coding. GitHub is also used for project management, actually. So you can actually view tasks, ongoing tasks, tasks in progress, and all that, tasks that has been accomplished. You can also move tasks that, just if you are very familiar with Trello. So you also have a bit of those experience on GitHub, right?
Mhm.
So now it's just that GitHub just merge all these things, right? And of course, developers and designers can have a space where they understand, where they can work with, understand. So now you look up, go through issues or search, you could search for design issues, right? Let's say, oh, maybe there's a project, an issue that says we need a social media design for
Yeah.
so conference, or we need maybe an UI update and all that. And as a designer, I feel like, oh, maybe I think I can work on this. Right. So what you do is first comment, understand. I maybe initiate a discussion, right? And okay, I can work on this, or I'm interested in picking this up as a project. You've initiated a discussion, understand, which already is counted, as a contribution, right? Because on GitHub you see the old green
Yeah.
box and
Mhm.
all those things. So that's just how you also start contributing to a project. So it's also counted as your activity on GitHub. So you
So,
initiate
so I'm
a
coming, Kingsley.
discussion.
So if I
Yeah,
come there and I see that kind of ticket, what I can do is create a comment. That's like my contribution that I can handle this. Then go back,
yeah.
design it, then come back and drop the Figma link there or the link to the flyer there.
Okay. That may not really be the best way to go about it. But one of the first things you always do is indicate interest, because you can't just see an issue, right? And you just go to contribute without indicating interest to work on it. It's an open project, meaning anybody can actually work on it, right? And so, but if you now indicate that, oh, I can work on this, or I want to pick this up, then the maintainer of the project will assign the project to you on GitHub, meaning someone else cannot or shouldn't. But if I want to still contribute, I will be asked to collaborate or join you, understand, maybe collaborate with you to work on that, but not like take it on a separate task. And now the
Uh,
maintainer now has like two designs to choose from, who is best. And if you give people that, makes people feel less of themselves, and
yeah.
okay, maybe I'm not respected and valued. So
Yeah.
now when you do that, now, if, for example, in case Africa, let me see use case Africa as a case study here. So, if you indicate an interest, right? So, one of the things we'll do is we add you to our Figma workspace. So, where we kind of like love, because we need to, it's an open project. I can't just create my personal Figma workspace and start
Yeah.
doing stuff.
That's true.
That's why it's open source, right? So that's why it's open source. Every other person should have access to that. So even anything should happen, right? Like the community doesn't get to lose, design
Anyways,
assets or
anything.
design files,
Yeah.
just like you have in your company, where if you want to leave, you hand off design stuff, right? To the
Yeah.
design and move on. So it's not your personal stuff. So it's just the same scenario here in open source. That's the whole idea. So if you go do your own thing and now share the link, it defeats the whole purpose of open source in a way. So even when I want to like, okay, I'm not comfortable because I use Adobe Suite, I use Figma and all that. So Figma is a good tool to collaborate. So what I do as a design maintainer most of the times is that if I want to create a template and I feel like I'll find it a lot more easier and flexible doing it with
Yeah.
Adobe Illustrator. So what I do is I work on it on Adobe Illustrator, create a template from it, and export it in a vector format. Take it to Figma, right? And of course, just work on the editable component and every other thing. Just are just there, right? So that if let's say you want to work on maybe a flyer or maybe a certain template, a YouTube thumbnail, all those things, right? You can easily edit it. Anybody can, just go and edit this, right? And then
Mhm.
work continues. So the whole idea of a GitHub one is being able to track contributions, right? That is being made, understand, giving everybody that space where they can just come and find issues, right, available to contribute. Because most people are like, how, I don't know, are there issues? Because when I joined initially, I didn't just know, there are open issues on GitHub. I
Yeah.
was just stuck on Slack. What's going? People just, I don't even know what's going on. Understand? So
Yeah.
it just after a while now realized that GitHub was like a different. Right. So one of the things I try to do now is bring in, trying to make designers. I'm still learning how to use GitHub, right? Some of the old technicalities and a few other stuff I need to know, right, to just get my work. It's just one of the things we've been in this space. You just have to learn. Right? So maybe a year ago I wasn't using GitHub. I had this profile, it was just there. And
Yeah.
sometimes you apply for jobs and as a designer, they're asking for your GitHub. Like, there's nothing there, guys. Why is asking for? But then I still share. But now I feel like I've not made a lot of contribution, but when I see the green boxes on my profile now, I mean, it'll feel good. So if you ask for my profile, I'm going to boldly share it with you because I don't have made some contribution. So if you ask, why do designers use or mosaic use, is really not a must, but I think it's just expedient, right? That you learn, right? If you must contribute, especially designers that really want to contribute to open source projects, you just need to, you know, have that basic knowledge of
Okay.
GitHub. It's not difficult, yeah. Just yeah.
Say it's not difficult, sir. That's what you are saying. I'm sure. I'm sure there'll be other people, other testimonies that say they're not. So now, this is one thing that we do. Now, let me know if this is
Yeah,
similar to what happens. If it's similar to like how to track work. So it's similar to how
yeah.
to track work, but I don't know if it's similar to like the open source space. So at Unkowoku, that's the name of the company, right? Is
What? What did you say?
Unkowoku is Igbo. So Unkowoku.
Oh, yeah. I will not try to pronounce that. Don't
Yeah,
worry, let's proceed.
just say NK. We call it NK internally. So at
Okay, okay, yeah.
NK, this is what we do. So it's an Igbo dictionary that translates Igbo words to English words and English words to Igbo words, and then English or Igbo words into definitions of those Igbo words, and then tell you the Igbo version of those words and give you audio pronunciation, right?
Oh,
And we have like an open API that anybody can use to build their own application. You can like use the audio recording, anything. So the API is open source, anybody can contribute and use it. So here's how we track work is I leave the designs there. So if somebody comes up and like, hey, there's a new designer, or there's this feature we want to include, what I do is go to Notion, create a ticket,
mm,
and then from that ticket, I add my name, add the person's name there, add the work, describe everything, and then send. And I just leave it there. And that's how we track work. So you then move it from progress to done. And once it's done, we add it to development and like we monitor it till it launches. Is that similar
okay.
to what usually happens? Like I think that's similar to what happens on GitHub as well. You know.
Yeah, it's similar. It's very similar to what happened in GitHub. But one other thing you need to understand now is that, except maybe you're using a premium version of Notion, right?
No,
I
no.
can't have access to it, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
only
So
only people that
what
join
I'm
the
talking
Slack.
about, Yeah, exactly. So I'm just talking about, in fact, you can join Slack via the GitHub route, and
Yeah.
GitHub is open to anybody and everybody, right?
Mhm.
So maybe as like some of our listeners right now, like, okay, what was this person talking about? So just jump on GitHub and just search for chaos, right? And you stumble on chaos this day in Africa, just see
Mm,
an issue you want to contribute, start commenting, oh, and then
oh,
you get a reply,
so
and automatically.
the
So
key
sometimes
points.
you also need to now, the another reason, sorry to interrupt, but
So
this is also one important thing I also love to mention is that some persons, I think is a particular name they call them, but I can't recall. You know, some persons contribute to project without being actively involved or being a part of that project. For example, you have these yearly open source events,
yeah,
Oktoberfest,
yeah.
that usually comes up in October and all that. So where people contribute to different open source projects. So I can just go on GitHub, search for a project. I'm like, okay, maybe these guys just need someone to work on maybe a button for their next design project, right? So I just create a few button components and everything, work on it, couple of everything, share the file with them, right? And move on. So I
Oh,
may not necessarily so but what you're saying now really implies that oh man, I must provide my information, provide everything.
yeah,
Understand? So if you do it that way, it means maybe people that just want to contribute at home. There are also set of people like, okay, I want to really be a part of this project, right? I
yeah.
want to have a project, I want to be here for a long run and all that. So GitHub just help kind of handle stuff like that. So
No, 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 no. I wanted to ask like specifically now this kind of project if people can do that to like contribute and just jackbar. And I was like the key thing, yeah, the key thing that I think is different from what we do is making it open to everybody. But right now, only people who join the Slack and have access to that notion can see that these projects are available. And like the
yes,
difference is like
yes.
it's open to anybody. So anybody can search on the web and find that okay, this project is available to work on. And like that's very key
Yeah,
to that, the difference.
yes, yes.
Um,
And of course, that's just the whole idea of
Open source.
open source. The source must and always remain open.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that's just it, bro.
Yeah. Let me give a quote. Is a Gucci Mane quote for one of Gucci Mane's rap. And it's like he without sauce is lost, but that same man can be lost in the sauce. He
It's okay. He without source
yes,
is
is
lost,
lost.
but that
But that
same
same
man
man
can
can
be
be lost in the sauce.
lost in the
In the
source.
sauce. Like I am lost. Like if he puts that out of context or into context now. I've been in open source, and I'm just lost. But
Mm,
I didn't know
okay.
well any of these things. But like the rap is out of this context. So but I just play around with that. But,
Okay. But let me also say that, maybe I should also define like the whole aspect of contribution, right?
mm-hmm.
Because when you talk about contribution, I think I published an article, yes. I think it should be like a Twitter thread or
Okay.
LinkedIn too.
I'm going to link
Yeah,
it in the description. So
okay, okay. So I put up an article and shared, how to go about contributing or two ways majorly you can contribute to open source project as a designer. I liked it some like two key points.
yeah,
But what are the nature of these contributions, right? Because that's another question you ask yourself. For maybe for a developer now could be, oh, there's an issue, right? An issue to be like, okay, I should change, maybe update so stuff on my code base or do this, or identify an issue. It could be a bug or something, and I fix it, right, and all that. So, but for design, what's really the nature of the contribution? So, it first of all starts with this. Is also how I love to put it. Like in my house right now, I wouldn't expect someone to come and tell me, come on, Kingsley, it's time to maybe mop, or it's time to
yeah,
maybe take off cobwebs, or it's time to, once you've been able to understand the project, right? You understand the project, you know what this project is all about. At first, when I joined Chaos, I was constantly waiting for, looking for someone to assign projects or assign stuff for me to do, which is
yeah,
actually what you find the scenario most times. A lot of persons join and they just want you to like message them, oh, Come on.
Also, yeah, they are
Yeah, it's
expecting
just
you to
like
tell them that this is what we have. Let me onboard you. And
exactly,
can you get on this?
exactly, exactly. So, and I understand it's this whole work culture, right? That of course you have tasks aligned for you in Trello. And I'm not saying most of the times you also find issues listed on GitHub, right? We have that part. There are issues listed on GitHub where, of course, you can do. But where there are no issues on GitHub, and these are an open source project, because it's only when someone identifies something as an issue that such issue will be open on GitHub.
Yeah.
Well, that might actually be an issue, but no one has been able to identify it, right? So you as a
Oh,
designer, as a UX designer, as a product designer that has been constantly telling us that you solve user pain points, you make project accessible, easy to use, and all this stuff. Now you're on, now you're in open source project, and most open source, softwares, you also
mhm.
agree with me out there, the usability is poor. More in
Yeah,
the sense that because most times people don't really, it's just the old developer thing, right?
yeah,
Focusing more on functionality than maybe accessibility and all that. But since your specialty is in design, right? So you start looking at, we have someone in chaos, right? Toria, she's big on accessibility. Understand? So
yeah,
while others are busy designing, like this stuff is not accessible. How do blind people get to interact with this platform? How do physically challenged get to interact with this platform? Understand? So you bring like different stuff to the table, right? We have content designers, right, on this whole project. We also have illustrators because as an illustrator, you can contribute to open source project. Understand? Because
mhm,
of course you know that now, of course, design trends and everything, illustrations is really taking the center stage in a whole lot. So you can find a better way to communicate. All the things I've been saying here can be put into simple illustrations on how to, okay, the old Twitter thread I made now can be
mhm.
converted into maybe like few illustrations, could be carousel on the chaos, maybe Instagram handle, and
Yeah,
people interact with it. So there are a lot of ways you can contribute to. It could be via design. And one of the things I pointed out yesterday too on that thread was that being able to identify an issue, it's actually a contribution. So as a designer, you don't necessarily have to push. I know people are just used to pushing, you know, pixels
fixings
around.
and just
Understand?
just enter
Yeah,
Figma, come up with something.
exactly. So if it's not on Figma, but I think maybe also a lot of designers to also have to understand that there's so much about design outside Figma, understand, or before Figma, right? So that's kind of like where you kind of put your final thoughts together. But there's actually a lot of thought process that goes into design before you even get to Figma. Understand? So by the time you understand that, you know that now you can identify an issue, right? But
Mhm.
identify an issue now, I might not necessarily have the expertise to solve that issue. Understand?
Yeah, yeah.
So I put it this way in the article that I could be just like you have conducting a usability test on a mobile application.
Mhm.
I could identify a bug, right? Like I did a usability test in one of our company's products last week and identified some issues, of course, some of which obviously were bugs. And I'm the product designer. That's not my place to solve the bug. I don't know if you get, but
Yeah.
I just had to,
You saw
because the
it and
developer
there was like,
himself probably too busy and then
yeah.
exactly. So now that issue is now open. So that way too is also a way for you to contribute to the project. So you
Mm,
can go through the ongoing design. Yeah, you can go through the design. If your specialty, your expertise in button designs, no problem. Of course, create buttons, create components, and make sure that the design components are consistent. Your own could just be like, oh, there are components created already. But are all the designers on this project actually making use of the components that are created? Because open source, a lot of persons contributing, coming and going, different people understand. And is the style guide updated to meet the demands, the design demands and all that? Because the bigger the project goes, the bigger the design system, the style guide, you have to keep updating and all that. So, it mustn't be you designing always. There are other things you can do. And as a graphic designer, not necessarily product design, you can contribute. We have media posts we put up. You can make the designs and posts. You can conduct usability. For most designers, like I'm big on user research, I'm big on interviewing
So,
users and all that.
so I could just go now and then turn maybe one open source project that they are mostly active on Twitter and just create
And
graphics for all their Twitter threads and then put it on their Instagram and then
exactly.
comment on
E-
GitHub.
Exactly, exactly. So what you want to do first is initiate such conversation with now. Okay, this is also very perfect because I mentioned it right
Mm-hmm.
on that thread too. That now two ways to contribute. Now I'll say this and link it to what you
Yeah.
just suggested. So two ways to contribute is one, right? There's an issue. So the issue could be, oh, design a media flyer, right? For maybe why you should join open source, right?
Yeah.
And then you identify that and you contribute. That's cool. The second issue could be you've looked, there's really nothing. And you, oh, these guys are just on Twitter. So what happens to maybe people on Instagram?
Mm-hmm.
So you guys have the content already on Twitter. Can we just at least leverage some people on Instagram and convert the content on Twitter to this thing? But that is not among the issues on GitHub. So what you now want to do is because it's not like your own project, your personal project, you want to discuss that with the maintainer, right? It could be the design
Okay.
maintainer also if I'm in charge of the project. So by the time you discuss that with the person, and I'm like, okay, that's a great idea. So the person will now decide to open that issue, right, on GitHub, create a ticket for
Mhm.
that on GitHub, right? So why create a ticket for that? That's also one other thing I mentioned in that show. I feel like the trail kind of capture a whole lot. So if you are
Yeah.
listening to me, just go. It's all my
Yeah,
sense.
the link
Yeah,
is in the description. You can just find it there. Yeah.
so now you create now the maintainer will create a ticket for that, right? So now the whole idea for creating the whole ticket is I also said that like one would say I came up with the idea, so like you just said right now, just go ahead and make the design. But how about scenarios where you come up with the idea, but visual design is not your thing, but you just got this idea. Like, why can't you just do this thing? So, meaning that even when you come up with the idea, you still need to create a ticket for that so that maybe someone with the expertise to work on that. So, coming up with the idea does not necessarily imply that you'll be the one to work on it.
Yeah.
Because I think this happens a whole lot of times in open source communities where people feel like, oh, they have the idea, but maybe they are not in the best place to work on that. And
Yeah.
maybe they just keep it to themselves and the
Yeah.
project is suffering, right? So whether you have an idea on a better way to develop the platform as maybe a software developer, but you as a designer and you can't do the work of a software developer, you just need to discuss with the maintainer because maybe you may not have the access to create the issue yourself on GitHub. So that's why you always constantly have to discuss with the maintainer. So you guys establish a common ground and then the maintainer will now create an issue for that on GitHub, right? And then anybody interested in that can proceed. So like you also said, so once that issue you've discussed with the maintainer, I can now decide to like, okay, start making series of media designs for all their Twitter threads and then put it on Instagram. It's a way to contribute, right? It's a way to like, we have social media managers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Managing open source handles. Right? If not, it's
Mm-hmm.
just there, and you notice that most the open source handle, when you check, they don't post frequent. It's not like they wouldn't want to post, right? But people feel like maybe you have to be a developer for but they need social media
Yeah.
managers in fact most of the time. So these are a lot of we need content writers, right? So we need content, we need even a content designer, because maybe mine could be designing most open source projects, right? It's ongoing, still lorem ipsum and all that.
Yeah.
So we also need when you talk about designers contributing, everybody just look at you have to maybe it's Figma, Adobe XD, that's all what
It's
you're
more than
using.
that.
It's more than down to the basic graphics and everything and what you can just imagine as a designer, what it means to be a designer. You just bring every single experience you have
Yeah.
together
So
and you can always have
you could
something to
just
offer.
come to the team and all you do is, help them find bugs or design bugs. And even as a designer, that's contribution enough.
Exactly. You can go through what other designers are doing and already if or maybe because most times, for example, as a design maintainer, right,
Mhm.
I'm busy with a lot of other things, right?
Yeah.
In the community, overseeing what's going on and every other stuff. So I may not have the time to go down in detail, to like check every grid spacing,
Yeah.
everything down in detail. And come on, it does that. So now, of course, we have a style guide, like I mentioned initially. Now we have a design system in Chaos Africa, which guides some new designers coming on board to start working on a project. But then, people, this is another thing I'm going to mention too. Experience level too in open source projects is different. You just have people that probably are not very experienced in the space. I have some persons tell me, "Oh, I'm just gonna do it this way. I'm not good with auto
Yeah, I was
layouting."
getting there too because experience is one thing I also face where like people join and either they have way high experience and you as a maintainer are like, okay, I never reached your level yet, so how do we work? Or people join and they're like, you have little experience and you're like, okay, I have passed this level. How do I, communicate with you? Go on, tell me more. How do you manage that?
Okay. Okay, so well, now I think that's the beauty of open source, because the beauty of open source is going back to even Linus himself who started, the whole idea of open source. And I know the fact that anybody at any point in time can contribute, understand, irrespective of your skill level. And so, and I think, in fact, open source project is one of the best places for new designers, right, to come in, experiment, and learn and grow fast. Some persons are actually waiting for paid internship. It's funny, but I think open source is just one of those places, I never knew that before, because you work on some very good projects you can talk about and all that. So now, one of the ways to handle that, right, is to ensure that, in fact, having a design system in place helps sort out a whole lot of issues. You understand? And you know very well the importance of consistency in, design and everything. So, of course, when you have this now in place, right, I think every other thing can be a little bit easy to review. Understand? So
Yeah,
you can like just look at the overview or the functionality or usability aspect of things, rather than, oh, as spacing should be this, or maybe the button size should be these. All those things have been defined, right?
yeah,
For example, one of the things I did, the design system too in Chaos Africa is one of the things one of the projects I initiated when I joined. Understand? Because we didn't really have this. And one other thing too, other templates like that is also some of the things I've been pushing. So so that for us, for new designers to be able to contribute, because maybe the big guys may not really have issues with that. They can jump on and do their own thing,
yeah,
flex their muscles. But the newbies, like, so it's also an opportunity for the new designers to learn. Now, I've had a scenario where I assign a particular task. But sometimes you kind of have this issue. I'm like, okay, what are you comfortable working with? What do you think you're good at?
yeah.
Understand? That's another way to make things open, because it's not like you're in a job where, oh, whether you can or not, you just have to figure it out and work on it. You
Yeah,
can challenge yourself to do that, but then you can like, okay, I'm not so good yet. It
that's
doesn't mean you're
using
not working
auto
on
layout.
yourself.
Yeah,
So this is what you want to start doing. Then you might not necessarily work with something that really involves you using playing around auto layout. But then if that component is also important. Now, I had one contributor reaching out like, okay, I picked this to work on, but then I am currently learning this. And I don't know, do you have resources you can share with me to just help me better understand so that I can,
yeah.
so I share some resources with the person,
Mhm.
right? And then, of course, the person proceeded with learning and started working on what he was supposed to work on.
Yeah,
So the point I'm making, yeah, you find that scenario. As a matter of fact, you still find a lot of newbies per se in open source right now, because I think this ideology too. I think it's a very bad one, anyways. There's this ideology that in open source Africa per se, from what I've seen, it looks more like people that are not so experienced. I'm not saying this is
yeah.
general,
No, no, go on, go on. I
understand,
think I
but the
feel you.
bulk, yeah, yeah. So it's more like people, open source is for people that,
Who are not
especially for
experienced.
designers.
Yeah. People are
Yeah.
like
So
looking
people
for
like, oh man,
experience, looking for ways to contribute. Yeah.
yeah, you don't have something doing, come on, you just use open source to feel to feel it. So, but I think it's wrong, because what I'm saying is wrong is because I've interacted with some of our senior contributors and project owners here in Chaos, and when you consider the fact that these guys are experts, and I had a conversation with a lady on GoStack. GoStack is one of the open source project. I happened to like just stepped in, but come
Wow.
on, guy, I was just busy with a whole lot. So we had this conversation, and she's been at Drupal for like I think she said like 20 years, and
Jeez,
I was surprised. I think that 20 or 10, but I'm just sure it
that's,
was more than
that's a
10
lot of
years.
numbers.
I'm telling you the truth, and the more she's been able to accomplish, and she's actually an expert in her field and everything. So the fact that you find people of this category, right, contributing to projects tells you that there's so much more to open source project than maybe what we think it is over here, where maybe when I'm less busy, because you always tell people I'm busy, some people where
Yeah,
I'm busy, or I don't want to. So open source is not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? You just schedule, right? What time works with you and a task you feel like okay, I can get done. I'm contributing to open source and I have a whole lot of other things going on in my life simultaneously. So, so I think it's just best understanding, managing yourself actually.
it's like
So,
understanding like
no, so
how
like
to contribute. Sorry to contribute. It's like understanding how to contribute. Then it now makes it easier for anybody to contribute and still have you still keep your shit together, still keep your job, still keep other things. Like the idea, like
exactly.
before you explained it that for me, it was like I have to be embedded in the project and in the team and just be there.
Yeah.
But now it's more like, I can just take one weekend, just go through one open source project that I like, just find bugs, create issues here and there, and then actually give
Yeah,
detailed feedback and then move on. So I know that project
exactly.
is there'll be somebody else that'll come and pick it up and like say, okay, I want to work on this and like just handle it.
And you can add that to your, it could be your portfolio or to your CV or to
Yeah,
whatever. You can write about it anywhere. And of course, no one will take it away from you as long as the project has been recognized, right? More
yeah,
like just in the case of developers, could be your pull request has been merged, right? So
yeah,
for designers, could be your design has been accepted, reviewed and accepted. Like, okay,
yeah,
cool. They've used the design. Could be maybe for something, or it could be a hero session of the page or whatever, understand?
yeah,
That's been used. You can actually claim that credit, understand? On your CV, you can add it to your CV that you contributed to the
yeah,
project and all
yeah.
that. So, even if you just want to just contribute and be moving about, just contributing, maybe
Excuse me.
what I will call a positive
How do I get started in terms of like resources and stuff like that? How do I find resources to learn? Let's say there's somebody else listening now. How do they find resources to learn? Where do they get started? Is there like a pool of projects they can jump on, or I have to randomly, Google search each open source project I can contribute to?
Okay, thank you so much. That's a great question. Of course, I was expecting it. So, um, well, Googling is also a very good place to start. But if you want to save yourself time to Google projects, I believe you can just jump on GitHub, like I said. So most projects you find. In fact, I think in the course of maybe just prepping for this podcast, anyways, I stumbled on a video. Actually, a guy talked about in an untitled conference, design conference. I think Tisha, that
Yeah.
just reminded
Oh,
me
I'm
of it.
wearing their
So
shirts, by the way. It's UDC.
yeah. So a guy talked about I never really even talked about open source. He said that on Figma where people create templates, right? And then you go duplicate it and use it and all that. He said that's open source, right? That's kind of like because open source, it's just giving back to the community. So you have people duplicate other people's templates, like 2,000, a million duplications, and so on and so forth. Understand? So this kind of like helps you. For example, it helps you maybe make things faster, create stuff faster. Understand? So that's what open source does, right? So if you want to at that level, right? Like as a designer, I want to create maybe a design system, which a very comprehensive design system, most of the times you find that it's being sold. Maybe if you follow Musical and all those guys.
Yeah, all those guys.
so tell you, oh, by the time you just get some part, like the other parties, you pay so things. So if you now want to probably pick few other couple of designers with you and work on updated material three, design templates and all that,
Yeah,
updated, understand, and put it out there on Figma, right? Make it open. Understand? People duplicate it, use it for their project. That's a way for you giving back to the design community. And people can constantly, because you can also create a project from that. understand?
Mhm.
Where you gather designers just to be working on updating stuff like that. So you can create that one. But if you want to contribute to maybe other projects too, as a designer, for example, the Chaos project. So I mentioned that if you're lucky enough, probably just hit me on LinkedIn or Twitter, like, okay, Kingsley, how do I contribute? Then you're interested in sticking around to contribute. Then I'll probably share our workspace link with you. So you join our Slack workspace
Why
and
did you
then
say
just join.
lucky enough? Kingsley, why did you say lucky enough? Are you hard to reach?
Okay, not like hard to reach. Like
Mhm.
maybe I also consider myself like lucky you're reaching out to me and stuff. So
Okay,
we are lucky
okay.
at, yeah. So if like we are lucky and you just want to, because it's always about taking the action to get these things
Mhm.
done, right? So if you message me on
Mhm.
LinkedIn and on Slack or on Twitter rather, so I'll share our workspace with you. So you join our Slack workspace, and then maybe add you to our repo, and then you see projects. But if you don't want to go through all that, and after listening to this podcast right now, you're like, okay, I want to go straight up and start contributing or seeing issues to contribute, then just go to GitHub, right? Go look for open source project, or maybe if you search on Google for open source project, so maybe you could see WordPress, you could see Chaos, you could see other open source projects, you could see UDC, and
Mhm.
then you now take the name. So let me just assume you don't know any name of any open source community you want to.
Yeah.
So you search, Google can help you with the name, even ChatGPT now can help you with the name. So you go on GitHub, right, and then search for their repository, right? So when you search, right, you just navigate to the issue tab. So the issue tab is where you find ticket that's been created for, tasks, more like issues are kind of like tasks,
Mhm.
right? So you find these issues and you find just search for design issues. They'll always have labels, right? If it's a
Okay.
developer issue, if it's a design issue, they have labels. So now you pick a particular issue. And like I said, you don't just jump right on your Figma or your Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop, XD, any of those tools you use and start creating your, what you do first is initiate a conversation or a discussion with
Mhm.
the maintainer, or like when you click on that issue, you see a comment section on GitHub where you can add a comment like, okay, I am interested in working on this, and add your comment.
Okay.
And that's just where it all starts, right? So you will certainly get a reply from the maintainer of the project or anyone involved, right? And from
Mhm.
there, like, okay, proceed, and you start working on. It's really not different from your regular design work. It's just that it's open source. Yeah. So
Nice.
that's how you go about contributing.
Mhm.
So
Are
I don't
they
know if that makes sense or there
Yeah,
was
that
anything
that makes
technical.
sense.
Yeah.
There's nothing that makes sense. Are they bad or good like open source projects? You must use bad or good here. Oh. I know you have been avoiding it, so you must use bad or good here.
Well, maybe I would say I haven't contributed long enough to probably be a judge.
Mm. You
And
don't
to know
define
which
corner
project
where
is.
you could take avoid the bad or good question.
No, I think whether it's bad or good is just within the context of how it appeals to you as a person, how the project appeals to you as a person, right? So so far I would say Chaos Africa, right? It's been a good project for me. Why? Because I've actually learned, I've connected, I've networked with a lot of persons, right? So I've gotten a lot of plenty benefits from Chaos
Hey,
project.
hey. Ah, what kind of benefits?
So
Money, shares, swags, jobs. You have traveled out of
um,
the earth. Oh.
yeah, there's actually a whole lot of open source will always do for you that your paid job can do for you actually. So, but that's a story for another day. So let's go back to the discussion.
Hmm.
Let's go back to the
You dey
discussion.
avoid wetin go make people come. Something dey that place.
Wait today.
Something dey. Go on.
Yeah, let's
Go
go
on.
back. Let's go back to the discussion. Um, so now I think that's why it's kind of important for you to pay attention to looking out for good projects. So good projects in the context, what's good for you?
Okay.
Understand? So what's good for me may not necessarily be something good for you. Understand?
Okay.
Good for me could be, oh, this project is there are a lot of things that are defined already in this project. Understand? I once spoke with a designer that said he joined a certain open source community, and once he landed on their Figma workspace, he was confused. He didn't know what was going on. Everything was just like nothing
Yeah.
was organized, designs everywhere. You don't even know where to go, what to touch, and all that. Mind you, there are also people to Invest Africa, and what they do is just to make sure that things are rightly labeled,
Hmm.
right? To ensure that as you come in, understand you are not just looking around like you know
Oh
where to go
shit.
and where to find what.
I need to do that.
Understand? So, so these, like I said, it's not always about design. It's just about making life easy. Understand? So, which designers brag about. So, I feel like yeah, I feel like so. What some persons like, they like things organized, right? So for me, I'm looking at a project that is organized as the maintainer is active, and that could be a good project. And a project, I want to identify this project because maybe there are certain benefits I can get from the project too. There are a lot of other benefits like that. Some could be like travel benefits, and some could be like speaking engagement and all that comes with certain benefits, and you're enjoying that benefit, as a
Mm-hmm.
contributor, right? So now that could be good in your own context. No, bad could be in the context of, oh, maybe this project is really not active, understand, and there's nothing really going on, or the project is not exciting, understand. I don't enjoy working on the project, but that also goes back to you because, like I said, you just spend time first studying the project. Are you sure you're okay with this project? Are you interested in this project? Does it sound like something that appeals to you? Then,
Okay.
if it sounds like something that appeals to you, then it's certainly going to be a good project. If it doesn't, maybe you are the one that will find faults with the project, but you
Mm-hmm.
still find other people understand, enjoying, and talking about the project you're resenting. So that's just it.
Matt. Makes sense.
So
Makes
I
sense. I
can.
say I keep asking you questions. I say for now, like next 1 hour, we'll just be going. Like I don't know, questions keep coming to my head. So far,
Yeah,
this makes sense.
it's okay. We can just have some chat of podcast time.
I've been
I'm
now.
very open to that time.
Okay, no, that means we have to do this again. You have to come on the podcast again. I'm telling you now, putting you on the spot. Are you going to come on this podcast again?
I'm most certainly going to honor this invitation again for the fact that I must confess that this is actually my very first podcast. So
Okay. Okay.
I
Nice.
think it's actually worth coming back here.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Namaste. Namaste. Yeah. So
You're
this is
welcome,
going,
David.
we're coming to the end, and I have more questions. However, we can't spend much
Yeah.
time. So where can people like find you aside Twitter? You share your resources, your Twitter link to your thread, your article. Do you have a YouTube video, a YouTube channel as well?
Okay. No, I don't like
Yes.
you. I, I,
Yes.
I don't maybe yeah yet actually yet. I was actually thinking of TikTok. TikTok is becoming a thing where perhaps I can do more about
Mhm.
this because probably not be able to really organize what you're doing, but then just get a lot to because for me,
Mhm.
one of the things I really want to do, the problem I really want to solve in this space is that you and I know so well that the open source hasn't really been a challenge. I would put it that way for developers,
Yeah.
right? And it's really been it's just like more like developer thing. That's how the culture has always put it, like make it
Yeah.
feel like it's just a developer thing. But when I join, mine is to bring more designers into make more designers see reasons, at any level, understand, to see reasons to contribute to open source projects, right? Right. So, build this culture of designers, understand, seeing the need to, give back.
Yeah.
As designers, we actually take a whole lot actually, because even most of the tools we use as designers too are actually open source. Understand? Most of the tools we use, you talk about like tools like Blender, it's a
Yeah.
whole lot of that is being done by people, understand, developed by people. We have tools out there that you download resources from, it could be 3D, all those things are created by people. These are open source projects. And for me, I think I just came with the conclusion, I came up with the conclusion that yes, maybe open source must have started with probably open source started with coding, right?
Yeah.
with writing codes, but certainly the future of open source or where open source is headed, or probably whatever is going to be come out of open source is just going to be revolved around design. Understand? Because now, especially in an era where you're talking about low code and no code, understand? The
Yeah.
future is moving to accessibility, ease of usage, and all that. And who are those that are in a better position to talk about this more than designers? So you
Yeah.
see more reasons why designers, should come into open source, right?
Mhm.
And I don't know, but this is actually what I want to like. This is what my goal as as a designer in this space. What I my goal is what I aim to achieve. I seek to achieve in this space. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's good. I'm definitely looking forward to that future. Like with the whole AI thing, I swear that's another gist guy, like having the whole AI thing. Yeah, I saw, I'm going to put the thread. I'm going to put the link to the tweet in description
Yeah.
for people listening. But I saw this tweet where this guy literally just typed out shit, just typed, and then the AI just builds the UI for it. And I'm like, this is scary and it's also interesting at the same time. Because I'm like, wait, so you mean a startup founder? Well, I think that's the case where a startup founder could easily just come up and build UI from scratch and use it to launch his product. But is this sustainable in the long run? See, we can see if we consider that just
Of course, there's been a quote going around that AI will not take your job, but someone using AI will actually.
uh,
So I don't think for one, because one common factor among AIs we always know is that they are machines, obviously, they don't have emotions, right?
yeah,
And this is one thing that really separates human from, AIs.
yeah,
Yeah, it's really going to be a whole lot. I personally use AI for a couple of other sources. I do a lot, and I must say that it's huge, honestly. And if you're not even using the AI, I don't even know how you're working currently.
I
Trust me, I don't know how you manage to do your work and handle some crazy tasks. It makes my whole thinking process. It makes me spend less time on thinking, actually. So now, I feel like it's just going to transform a whole lot, but perhaps maybe we wouldn't really want to judge because when you look at some of those UIs generated by these AIs, they're not really realistic and more like what's on a
yeah,
daily usable kind of with, So, but then I'm not still going to judge. I wouldn't want to be among the people judging that right now because these things just keep developing
yeah,
over time.
yeah,
So based on information that is being supplied and all that, and of course it always falls back to the prompt and all that. So we believe that over time this is going to change, this is going to get a lot better, and probably they come up with better results. But then I feel like a designer, right, with AI, it's more like come on, you're really gonna be one of those superheroes, in Marvel movies and all that. So because you have the emotions, right? And the
mhm,
emotion aspect of things, you can empathize more. Empathy is the key
yeah,
word right there. Because even look at it as a designer, when you do all those badass designs and put up the app on App Store, it's not about the founder and that using AI to generate this thing. And upload the bottom line is people have to use and
yeah,
usability is not always a function of how amazing. Usability is not a function of how amazing your app looks. There's just
yeah.
something funny about usability. And one funny thing about usability is that people even use your product for certain things you didn't even account for on your user journey.
Exactly. Exactly.
So So over time, it's also something that you as a product owner now realize over time and probably tend to start making provision for that and probably see how you can even make profit of that. Understand? So now when you also look at that and what some of the screens it's just like it's just human plus AI is going to do wonders. But when you just look at AI, just like oh, it's just AI doing everything. I think it's really still gonna take a whole lot of time. I
Yeah.
don't know, but I don't want to be one of those guys in history that doubt the possibility of this. And I don't want to go down in history like one of those guys.
Uh,
So that's why I'm saying that I believe that over time, right? everything these guys, yeah, just basically works with data, right? The more
Okay.
data you supply, the
I
more
see.
refined the data, the more fine and all that. So the output is gonna get better and better and better. So
Yeah.
that's just my thought.
Yeah. I I
Yeah.
I can't
So
agree. I can't agree less, guy. You are very correct about it. More of people who can use it to have an advantage. And like the aspect where it's 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 not specific enough that it can have common sense, right? So it's like it can design you a screen or a landing page, but then the people who are going to
yes,
use that landing page are probably going to use it in instances that the AI cannot judge. However, if you're a human being, you can easily make
yes.
that decision. It's the fact that it lacks common sense gives us that edge over it. I think that's the selling point. But the
Do you know?
Mhm.
Let me also add this too. Sorry, sir. When you have like because I'm saying this because I also enjoy this part of user research and user interviews, right? So
Yeah,
one of the things you use, probably one of the things that helps you make decision, you understand, it's not just about what the users say when you interview, of course, how they react, their gestures,
yeah,
right? So now gestures, because I can tell you I am fine, but obviously my gesture doesn't show that I am fine.
yeah,
Or I am typing telling AI that I am fine at the moment. AI is just taking what I'm saying. But as a designer that I've been able to interact with the user, I have seen the user. That's why cases where you also have one-on-one interviews are also very key, where you study a
yeah,
certain user group, how they behave, not just their feedback. So how they behave also influences, your design decision. So when it comes to that at the moment, I don't think that sometimes people can't describe how they behave, but you can make things out of how these gestures, right? Because you're human, you can relate to that. It's just
yeah,
something you know because you're human.
yeah.
AI doesn't understand this
Exactly.
right now. Understand?
Exactly.
So that's what I'm saying, that not until these AI also get to a point where they can decode certain gestures and make certain conclusions, right?
Uh,
Then I think every other thing right now is more like you say, just like the way you explain, just taking off, just making more generic things, right? And
mhm.
based on data supplied, and won't be able to make some very key user-centric decisions because of this whole factor right now that I just brought up.
Yeah.
So that's my point.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with that. It's this very similar to when we had the Web3 Kenny, that the whole everybody was going to Web3, the whole Web3 buzz. Now, well, I'm not saying,
Individual designer.
uh, it's cool. This discussion was nice. I really
You,
enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it, guy. Uh, I'm
it
looking
was
forward to the
actually
time.
great talking, actually.
Yeah, it's nice. It's always fun. It's always fun for me talking to like new people that I find really interesting on the internet about product design. Mostly when they're Nigerians, like it just makes so much sense. Yeah, thank you very much for coming, Kingsley. We come to the end. I'm really excited.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. There's this thing where I do for all my guests is I give them a match. This is not the match, though, but it's a not just design match. It's nice. So
Okay.
when that time come, I'll send it for you. Now let's see if you
Wow, I was expecting it right say when that time come.
it's not that far. It could
Okay.
be at the end of this February. I'll send it to Port Harcourt, and I hope fuel has not increased the price. Let it not be more expensive. And the shirt is still. Well, wow, wow,
I'll take
yeah,
your word for it. Thank you. Thank you so
wow.
much.
Thank you for coming. It was good having you here. Have a nice
Thank
day.
you.
Namaste, namaste, sensei. See you on the next one. For people listening,
Bye. Thank
for
you.
people listening, link
Yeah.
to find Kingsley's in description. You can always reach out there. Yeah, if you have any other interesting topic you want to speak about, or you want to hear me speak about to anybody, let me know. This podcast is sponsored by Narration. And bye. Have a nice day, Kingsley. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.